Be a legendary leader. Fireground failures are leadership failures. Learn the skills to be a legendary leader in the firehouse and on the fireground. Go to firegroundcompany.com.
In today's episode of the Fireground Company podcast, we discuss the threat of terrorism and how to prepare for a day when resources are spread thin and you are pushed to your limits.
The Fireground Company podcast.
In 2001, a senior leader in the Afghan resistance once told a story of a meeting he had with a very accomplished and respected CIA senior operative in the U.S. The operative broke into tears as they were discussing the growing reports of an emerging terror group led by an ambitious young Saudi named Osama bin Laden. When the resistance leader asked the U.S. operative why he was weeping, he said, "I know what's going to happen, but no one will believe me. And no action will be taken until after it happens. How do I live with that?" What would you do if you heard substantive details about the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers before it happened? That is the question that the contributors to this book wrestle with daily. We came together from different backgrounds with different sources, compared notes, and arrived at the same conclusions. A storm of chaos is coming, and Americans are in danger. We believe several Islamist extremist enemies of our nation have decided to put aside their differences and team up to defeat their common foe, the United States. They have learned from their past mistakes, honing their tactics to slip by our defenses and hit us where we live, work, and play. And unfortunately, if a series of complex local attacks were to occur, our government isn't ready. Neither are our communities, nor our citizens. According to numerous sources, the threat is imminent. Our enemies have finished their preparations, their henchmen are in position around the country, and their plans are finalized. The long-term goal of our enemies is a global caliphate that dominates our Western way of life. And their short-term objectives include inflicting as many casualties as possible to advance a multi-decade plan to destroy the U.S. and the West. This kind of attack could shut down emergency response efforts. Much like 9/11, communications will be inoperable. If lessons from October 7th, the Vegas sniper, Mumbai, and other local attacks are to be heeded for a time, the only people we will be able to depend on will be ourselves, our families, and our communities, and if we are lucky, a few local agencies. Why does this matter? Because our estimate is that this gathering storm will probably strike locally across multiple locations. Whether you have a formal title or not, if you are responsible for keeping people under your charge safe from harm, then this book is for you.
All right, well, that was awesome. That was great. A lot of sunshine and lollipops. I appreciate that. And probably everyone's wondering, what the heck are we talking about? And is this the Fireground Company podcast?
Yeah, am I listening to the right podcast?
Yeah, and it is. So a little background to this. This is a book about some gloomy stuff. This all started, I was listening to another podcast. I was listening to the Sean Ryan Show, one of the bigger podcasts out there. It's episode 149. I'll have a link to that in the description. And he had this lady on. Her name is Sarah Adams. She's a former CIA analyst. So he's interviewing her, and she's talking about this threat to the U.S., the homeland. So, of course, that, perks my interest up, and I'm like, threat to the homeland? What the heck are you talking about? And she starts going into this whole thing where, I guess, we think Al-Qaeda is over for the most part, right? We killed Osama bin Laden. Mm-hmm. We took him out. The bad guys, they're done. They're not really a threat to us anymore. But apparently, they reestablished themselves.
Okay.
So
and this is news to a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really hear about this, and there's a possibility that Osama bin Laden's one of his sons is still alive. I guess she was saying that they thought they took this guy out at a certain point. The U.S. got rid of him, but he's still out there, and of course, he's really unhappy about his dad being killed and wants revenge. So Al Qaeda, I guess, reformed and hatched this plan. And I guess, you always hear this stuff in the news about terrorist threats and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I heard this before, this and that, and it is what it is. There's always something that could happen. But what got me, I think, more focused in listening to this was she was talking about a lot of the information is connected to after in 2023 when Israel was attacked with I think over 1,000 plus basically militant terrorists and all, the number of people that died over there and the few hundred hostages that they took and all this other stuff. That intelligence, when they looked back at that, is leading them to this information also. So it's already something that happened. Obviously not in the United States, but that was a significant worldwide event that caused a lot of chaos, injuries, death, all this other stuff, right? And they connected the dots back to that, saying that there is 1,000 trained terrorists already in the United States, just sitting out there in these little cells. And she goes into more of it, and it's just it gets really scary. Where you're looking at there's these smaller groups of I don't know the exact numbers, but say like 6 to 12 guys, and they don't know each other. So if you arrest these 6 to 12 guys, you're not going to find these other ones. And the plot, what they're planning, is significant. So what they're planning is simultaneously, possibly over the course of a few days, attack multiple cities with stuff that we've seen before, with firearms, improvised explosives, possible vehicles running over people, all this terrible things that we have seen before, all at the same time, and basically overwhelming police and fire. Okay. And what do we do? If we had, you think about in your town or your city, you have multiple events, not just one shooting, but you have multiple shootings, or you have, multiple fires going on at the same time. It pushes us to the limits, right?
Yeah.
So I started just paying more attention to that. The book that you just read out of, the title is The Gathering Storm. That was put out within the last year. Okay. And it's a little rough the way it's worded because they, I think, quickly put it out.
Yeah, but they felt the need to get this out.
Exactly. And, that just summarizes a lot of the information in depth. So if you're really interested in that, a book version, you can go to Amazon. Again, I'll put the link for you. So if that's something you want to look into, you can do that. The link for the original show, the original podcast, the Sean Ryan show, I'll put that up there. And then I started to see other stuff, like other special op guys on YouTube and other podcasts and former people in the CIA and other intelligence organizations. And they're all kind of talking about this. Okay. So like, hey, sounds like this is a legit possibility.
The threat is real.
Yeah. And whether it happens or it doesn't happen, who knows? I mean, hopefully behind the scenes, the FBI and whatever, local law enforcement is finding these dudes and they're getting rid of them, right? But we don't know. And this could materialize. And if it materializes like we just talked about on this grand scale across the country, multiple locations, and in some cases in different towns or cities, multiple places within those towns and cities, who's going to deal with it? The local police and the local fire department. So I start thinking beyond that, that's, what would you do to prepare for that? But beyond that, it makes you think about, whenever we're pushed to the limit, right? Okay. So when are we pushed to the limit? I mean, it's a natural disaster. Yeah. Some kind of mass casualty incident, whether that's some kind of act of violence, some bad guy, or just maybe some kind of vehicle accident with multiple people injured. You just don't know, right? There's always a possibility of us getting pushed to our limit as far as what we can do, the resources that we have. So that's something we should always be thinking about. Okay. So what I wanted to do is you can take that intro and the information we gave you, and I highly recommend you look into that. So Google that stuff, use those links I'm going to give you, look at that. There's a whole bunch of information out there. I think you should be aware of that. That's an easy drill that you could do on I don't know, a Saturday morning, a Sunday morning at the firehouse, just an awareness kind of thing where you know that this is out there. But after you realize, hey, this is out there, the awareness of these things that could possibly happen, what do we do?
What do we do?
What do we do?
And for anybody that's doing this job, I think as you were talking there, I was, I was thinking about how often the threat of terrorism has been in the news cycle, over the last decade or so,
Yeah.
and we've kind of become complacent with it. It's become white noise, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
that's it's there, right? And no matter what side of this area you're on, I think even between us, we're sort of in two different places in it. You read a lot about it. You're very up to date on it. I don't even have the internet on my phone, so I don't keep up with a lot of this stuff. And
You don't have the internet on your phone?
I deleted it.
Wow.
And for all
crazy.
the
Oh, good for you.
going, I'm very into the simple life. I don't, but I do want to be a good I want to be a good fireman. That's all I want. And so that being said, whether you're like me and you're completely closed off to this stuff, or you're more aware of this stuff, either way, you got a job to do. And I guess the point I was making about it becoming white noise is that, no matter how much the details of it, responding to a large scale event like this, whether it is a natural disaster, whether it is a terrorist attack, it's part of our job. And it's very easy to become complacent and say, oh, that's not going to happen here. It's not, and we also do a lot of these like mass casualty training stuff. And I think for whatever reason, again, that has kind of faded into the background of priority because we think it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen to me. I don't know, whatever, these stupid tags and all this stuff. And, everybody jokes about it. You walk in and I know the training, they go through so much effort to put these big mass casualty drills on. And anyways, because of the news, because of how often we talk about terrorism and unfortunately, very unfortunately, it's become a fact of life. And I hate that, but it is what it is. But we, as firemen, as first responders, we have to sort of bring that back up to our forefront. That doesn't mean we live in fear of it. That doesn't mean that we don't do anything but get ready for this. But it's the thing is, just like going to fires, just like going to EMS emergencies, responding to a large scale event like this is part of our job. So let's talk about, like you said, no matter how you're approaching the subject, whether you want to get into the nitty gritty and listen to all the podcasts and get all the details about it, or you're just coming at it from the perspective of I'm a fire officer, I'm a fireman, this is my job, this is something that I need to be prepared for on a skill-based level. Let's talk about what we can do to be better prepared for this kind of thing.
Yeah. So it all starts with knowing your gear, your tools, what you're bringing with you. And let's start with what you can overlook. So I think most people out there listening, we don't run many mass casualty incidents. I have, it happens, but it's not something you run a lot of, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a few people here is the max you deal with. And a lot of times that is in relation to car accidents and stuff like that. But go over those supplies. So an easy drill is, and we've done this before and probably should do it a little more often, is we just pull out those supplies. So things you would use as far as something like a mass casualty situation where maybe there's some kind of explosion or shooting or something like that, because that could happen anywhere, right? That we've seen that happen, regardless of this threat we're talking about. That does happen. So little things like tourniquets. I mean, does everyone in your company feel comfortable with using those? I mean, really using those. So walk through the steps, understand how to put them on, just, pass the tourniquet around, have everyone, don't put it all the way on, twist it and, jack someone up, but just go
Unless
through.
you're mad at them.
Yeah, you could do that. That'd be, kind of interesting. But anyway, just put them on and just make sure you understand how they work and everyone's comfortable with it. And a great way to do that is just, have everyone do it once, man, because some people aren't going to step up and they may not know how to do it, and that's okay. Just say, hey, look, if you don't know how to do it, that's fine. The whole point of this is to make sure you're comfortable with this. We don't do this much. It's okay.
Yeah.
Let's get better.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think we did this recently at our firehouse, and it was very casual, and I think that helped. So we just got everything out, and we just had all the supplies out. I think we had some like training ones, with the H bandages and
the clotting,
the
clotting bandages, how to use those, where can we use them,
and here's the thing, and this is actually true for a lot of training, is outside of like an official training environment where they try to put these big drills on where there's like this pressure on you. It's so useful to just be in the day room, comfortable in your firehouse, just hanging around, making a couple of jokes, as dark as they may be, and just kind of handling these things with no pressure. Get them out, get the tourniquets out, mess around with them. Same with all that other stuff in sort of a low pressure environment where you can have conversations about it. And I think, getting hands on and, without a specific scenario, I guess is what I'm saying, where you have to like put it on a dummy or something like that, just do it over and over again. Strap down a tourniquet around an object or something like that, get as tight as you can, things like that. Just getting your hands on like that in sort of a low pressure environment makes you comfortable with these things.
Absolutely. And I would say the next thing to think about is, this didn't occur to me until I was involved in a mass shooting where there was multiple people shot, is how do you divide your supplies up? So usually we operate as whatever we show up in. So if we show up in a medic unit, we operate together. If we show ambulance, whatever, engine, truck, whatever it may be, we operate together. But in a situation where you have multiple people shot and you're one of the first arriving units, you may have to divide supplies up. So how do you do that? If you do have a mass casualty bag that you carry, how do you divide that up? You just talk about it, think about it, see what you actually have in there. If you have, 8 tourniquets, hey, you two grab 4, you two grab 4, do something like that, divide the supplies up. Just think about that. At the very least, have a conversation of what you would do, because that's something we don't think about much. Usually we're focused on 1 or 2 people and we can kind of deal with that. But when it starts getting beyond those numbers, you got to think about how you're going to divide your supplies and your resources until that additional help shows up, because it may be a while before they get there. And that wasn't something I thought about until I actually had to deal with it as an officer and realized I didn't have a plan and we could have done better. And after the fact, we talked about that. So that's just
I remember when you told me about that day, and it was kind of a big event, and I remember you said that was one of your, it just hit you with like, holy crap, like this is something you don't think about until you're in it. And that was one of your big takeaways, was like, how do I divvy up resources and supplies, whether that's, human like personnel, or whether it's just, we only have so many tourniquets, we only have so many whatever. And like you said, in our day to day, we're so used to all of our supplies for this one person that called us right now, or this one victim or whatever. But when you have a bunch of people, you got to start thinking about stuff like that. And the worst time to have that conversation is on the day when it happens. So that's why we're encouraging you to start having that conversation now. It doesn't mean you have to lock in every detail, because every event is different. But if you have a conversation at least about that might come up, that you might have to divvy up people and resources, you're going to be better prepared, so that on that day you say, hey, remember we talked about this, you take these 4, I'll take these 4, it will go this way.
Yeah. Now think about how, if it's a crew, how do you divide your crew up? You probably want to have experience equal on both sides to the best of your ability. So if it's you as the officer and you take maybe the junior firefighter with you, and then the most other senior firefighter, give them the other person. So that goes into it too.
That's a good point.
Also, some of the other things is some fire departments have this, is they have some, ballistic vests and stuff like that. So bulletproof vests. Some departments have that. They may not have enough for everyone. So how do you divide that up? That's something you need to think about. And then what does that vest do? A lot of people don't know. We're not cops. We're not really trained on that. A lot of those, so-called bulletproof vests, they're not bulletproof. Mm-hmm. They only can protect you to a certain point. Most of the ones fire departments have, and you can look on if you look on the internal, I guess it's stuff that actually protects you on the inside. If you look on that, there's a label that tells you, and you'd have to probably look that up to see what that means. There's different levels of protection, but most of the ones that the fire department has usually they're only going to protect you from handgun rounds. They're not going to protect you from a rifle. So understand what that means. And a lot of the stuff the police have, it's the same thing. It only protects you up to handgun rounds, not rifles.
Right.
So understand that.
Yeah.
Know your gear, just like your turnout gear. Understand that there's a certain limit to what it can do.
It doesn't make you bulletproof.
Correct. And then the other thing I realized, and because we have some, is people don't know how to put those on. So if you have never worn those, you don't understand. You try and force them on, and you look like a goof and everything else. So that's not the, when it actually happens, that's not the time to do it. So if you have one of those, pass it around, make sure. And people, again, they're not going to want to do it because they don't want to be embarrassed. But if you tell everyone, you show them yourself. If you don't know how to do it, pull it out, open it up, figure out how to put it on, everything else. If you have someone that has some law enforcement or military experience, have them maybe show everyone if you don't. And everyone should put it on. Actually put it on, how the Velcro works and the flaps and everything else, so they understand how to do that. And it's not a one-time thing. You're probably going to have to do this maybe every few months or every month, whatever, if you're really on your game. But you got to go back to it and make sure people understand how to use those tools that we don't typically use if you have them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. It's a simple drill. Just that's all you have to do is if you carry something like that on your rig, get it out, put it on.
All right. So this catastrophic homeland attack we're talking about, it could start very small, or again, this goes for any incident where you get dispatched to something and the notes or the rebroadcast, what the dispatcher's telling you, it sounds a little off, right? This is, if you have computerized notes in your apparatus, read through those, read through the notes, read through all of them and see if it makes sense. You may get dispatched to something and you're like, wait a minute, is this an assault? A shooting? What's going on here? Because there may be some stuff in there that wasn't relayed properly, and you get dispatched on something and you're going lights and sirens, and maybe there's no cops dispatched yet. Maybe the cops are going to be delayed. So read through that information when you get dispatched. And if you're not sure, and we do this all the time, we're just, hey man, we'll just go in that direction, but we'll drive like normal traffic. We're not going to have our lights on. Let's see if there's more information. We can call if we have to our communication center and ask for, hey, this doesn't make sense. Do you have more information? So just kind of slow play it. That's the incremental decision making, where you're moving in a direction, but you're not fully committed and you're waiting for additional information to make sure you're doing the right thing. You're not going to get your guys hurt or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. Remember, our job is to respond to the emergency. Obviously, in this scenario, it's usually an EMS situation, right, with shootings and things like that. Our job is not to deal with a developing situation, right? Our job is to come in and deal with the patients or the victims and things like that. It's so when you are proceeding into a situation that is not fully developed yet or is still in progress, we don't have all the information we need to even do what we're there to do. So I think we get in a habit of, obviously getting to places as quick as we can to mitigate emergencies. But in most of those cases, we already know what the emergency is and it's already happened. And now we're dealing with the aftermath of that. But when you're running into a developing situation, there's just too many variables for you to even be able to do your job safely. So you need to slow play it a little bit.
And then a lot of times in those situations, we're going to end up staging, right? So we're going to stage somewhere. And when you stage somewhere, you got to be smart about that. You got to think about it. Can I actually see the location they're talking about? If I can see it, if we're in line of sight, then if there's a bad guy there, they can see us. So it's the other thing where it's just, what are you doing? Because we've seen that before, right? These people will stage and it's like, you can see like that, the spot that they called in, the address. What are you doing, man? The cops aren't there yet and everything else. So again, if you don't go lights and sirens because you're waiting for the situation to develop and then you're going to end up staging or something, make sure you stage out of line of sight. Give yourself that buffer room to make sure you don't become part of the incident. and you don't add more chaos and more problems. And then when we start thinking about these, terrorism and that kind of stuff, if you have maybe some kind of target hazard like federal courthouses or whatever it may be, some federal installations, law enforcement, this, that, a lot of times you'll hear bomb threats and different things called in, and you have to stage for that. Try not to stage in the same area every single time, because if it's something you go to a lot where it's some kind of threat like that, if the bad guys are paying attention, they're going to pay attention to where you go usually. And then you're easier to become a target because they can predict that. So maybe vary where you stage a little bit. There's only so much you can do,
Right.
but try not to be that predictable. So think about that. Along with that is when you're involved in these incidents, don't linger. Don't spend a lot of time outside the apparatus. Do what you're supposed to do. Think about your safety, how exposed you are. Maybe you want to move away from just being in the street. Maybe you want to move inside some kind of building or load them up in the transport unit quickly, but don't just linger around. Try and do what you need to do and get back in the apparatus or in a building. And then on top of that, try and have a lookout. A lot of times this falls to the officer where you're paying attention to your surroundings. And this is just good common sense for even the EMS calls we go on, right? I usually try and stand back. I try and watch what's going on. Is there someone in that back room? Because you just never know, man. Things are chaotic. Weird things happen. First responders have become targets of, so you never know. So try and have someone that's a little removed, a little detached from what's going on immediately in front of us, that's watching the other people in the room or the environment so they can, look out for everyone else or give us, some kind of warning, something like that.
That's a good tip. Yeah. I mean, because, there's always going to be a few people that are involved in the skills, whether that's EMS or forcing a door or whatever, and there's usually somebody that's going to be a little bit more removed that can have that sort of 360 awareness.
Yeah. And that also goes into consider secondary attacks or secondary situations. So any kind of shooting or a terrorist event or something like that, consider there could be multiple waves of this. Or maybe there's someone that got away. If it's just a regular law enforcement thing, maybe there's still another whatever gunman at large or whatever the cops like to say. And, that could still be a threat out there. So pay attention because you just don't know. Maybe there's more people involved and the police may not even have the full picture. You never know. So just keep that head on a swivel, be smart, think about what's going on around you.
Yeah. And I think I just want to, maybe I'm jumping the gun here a little bit to make this point here, but maybe it's a good midway point here, is that we're not saying all this stuff to create some sort of fear. It's fear and awareness are two different things. We're not telling you to be, scared for your life. If you're a driver and you're out on your own, out in the open, it's not about fear. It's about awareness, because again, I can't emphasize enough, we're supposed to be the professionals on this day, whether it's a natural disaster or an act of terror or act of violence, any of these things, we're supposed to be the professionals, right? So a professional has awareness, not fear. And awareness means just heightening your sense of what could happen a little bit higher than the average person, right? So after all this episode about terrorism and all this stuff, it is a real threat. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to downplay it. But what I'm saying is the whole reason we're talking about this stuff is because your reaction is expected to be a professional reaction, not a reaction of fear or incompetence or inability. We have to do something. And that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah. And when it comes to that, taking action, a lot of times in these situations, when you're pushed to the limit as far as your resources, the people that you have to start thinking about consider what's best for the majority of people. So in any kind of mass casualty or situation where you just don't have the resources to mitigate everything, you have to think about what is going to have the greatest impact for the most number of people. That's just the way it is. And that can look that could be different in a lot of different ways, but you as an officer need to make that shift. And when you realize, whoa, we're overwhelmed. All right, what can I do that is going to help the largest number of people? That's the question you got to start asking yourself constantly. Okay, we can do this. Is that was going to help the most number of people, or is that too focused on just that guy or that person or a few people? So that's a shift that you have to make and understand, not to get sucked into the little stuff, but you're looking at the overall picture, and you may be making those decisions for a bit without any support above you. You're not going to have a battalion chief, or if you're in a transport unit, an ambulance, a medic unit, you may not have anyone else initially in whatever you're involved in. So even at the firefighter level, you're going to have to make decisions on your own until other resources show up sometimes. So it's good to think through those what ifs. I know we talked about that before. What if this happens? What do I do? Ask yourself a few questions in different situations and things you see that happen in other places. Well, what would I have done if I was there? Stuff like that.
Right. All right, let's shift gears just a little bit here. We've been talking a lot about it, sort of this overall and kind of honestly a lot of EMS stuff. Let's talk fire a little bit. I know you read something recently from Vincent Dunn that got you thinking about how to handle, and this may be at sort of a department level, but it's worth thinking about how to handle resources. And then we can also talk a little bit about how to be efficient as a single company operating. What do you got on that?
Yeah. So of course, the threat we're talking about may involve explosives, fires, stuff like that, or anything that is civil unrest where there's rioting, fire, stuff like that. So what do you do in those situations? And it was interesting. I was reading one of, I think it was Vincent Dunn's memoir, which is a good book worth getting. And he talks about in the 1970s when he was dealing with that in New York City, what they did. And if I remember correctly, he was talking about where they would set up these task forces.
Okay.
And they would, instead of having, you have a whole battalion and you have all these different firehouses and individual engines here, trucks here, what they would do is congregate and set up task forces where they would shut down the other firehouses. They would, at that point, they had the resources where they would leave a cop at the firehouse to protect it, to make sure people didn't break in and burn it down or destroy it. But what they would do is, I don't remember the exact setup, but it was something along the lines of you'd have like two engines, a ladder truck, and maybe a BC and a cop. Okay. And they would get dispatched to different situations where, say there's a fire here, that's what you get. That's all you get. That is what it is. You got to do the best you can. And that's how they dealt with some of the widespread stuff that, overwhelmed them at the time. So that, like you said,
and they would go to anything. So
yeah, I think they would stay together. Yeah, no matter what it was, if it was EMS, whatever, they would always operate together with the protection of the police, if I remember correctly. But that's something that would have to be above a firefighter or a company officer level. That would have to be battalion chief and above. But if you're a battalion chief and listening to this, or if you're, a company officer, maybe talk to your battalion chief about it and say, have you ever thought of that? What we would do, and, put that out there and see what people think. So it's nice to have some loose plan even about what you could do when resources get spread real thin across a region, an area, a city.
Right. Which leads us into our next conversation nicely, which is, where, I don't know, there's areas across the nation have different resources that show up to box alarms. In our area, we're sort of a densely populated urban area, so we get a ton of resources, and we're used to that. We're used to a second engine getting our water supply. We're used to two trucks arriving and having one on each side of the building, stuff like that. But when resources are taxed, you might not get what you're used to, but you're still expected to get the job done. So I think you have some things to say about what an engine can do, at least on their own.
Yeah, what I started to notice is I was thinking about, I was paying attention to some of these areas where they run a bit of fires. Historically, in maybe years past or even currently. You have examples like FDNY, like I just talked about back in the day in the 70s, what they would do. And you kind of start to understand, well, some of these places operate a little differently than I think a lot of other fire departments, where a lot of times for us, and I think this is common in many areas, where you wrap a hydrant or you split lay or something like that, and you drive towards the fire, right? A forward lay or split lay or something like that. And another engine comes in there, completes the water supply, right? But you ask yourself why some of these places, historically, like FDNY, they have these reverse lays where they show up at the fire address, they pull off the hose that they would need to go in the building and put the fire out, the attack line, but that's connected also to more line that they then deploy, drive down the street, and basically laying out the rest of that line, and they go to the hydrant. So you have the fire engine at the hydrant, the same fire engine, the first engine that showed up, and then it's still connected to the hose line that's going down the street to the rest of the attack line. And then, the driver gets out and they do their thing, connect it to a discharge, connect to the hydrant. So that one engine is independent and it can do everything it needs to do. It just did a reverse lay to the hydrant. And now you don't have to worry about that second engine showing up if they're delayed. I mean, another way of doing that is, I don't know all the details. I've read about it and seen it in the past, but, Detroit does something similar where they have these bundles on the back step of the engine, and very similar to probably for like us, our standpipe packs, where, if we wanted to do this, we could just grab our standpipe packs, throw them out at the address, and then pull maybe one of our long attack lines and connect the standpipes to that, and just kind of deploy that attack line, depending if we have enough hose line to go to the end of the block and pick up the hydrant. If not, we got to figure out, are we going to use 3-inch or something else to get the job done? But that's another way of doing it, where you have the hose line that you're going to use to go into the building, and you're going to connect that to another line that you're going to lay out going down to the street. And again, that takes care of the problem where I don't know where that other engine is coming from, or I don't know how long they're going to be, or maybe they're going to be significantly delayed, or maybe there's no other engine available. So what are we going to do? Are we going to stand there and watch the building burn down? We can do something. We can do that. So, but that's something you have to actually go out and practice. Mm-hmm. A lot of places, that's not a normal operation. So you have to go out and you have to practice that and walk through that. And you can't just do it once. You're going to have to do it maybe every few months or something. But that's a good tactic to have in your pocket when you're overwhelmed.
I think so.
Something it's very valuable to have. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another way is, your deck guns or ladder pipes. I mean, a ladder pipe would usually, you're going to have some other companies involved, but a deck gun from an engine, you're by yourself, and, the best you can do is maybe hit it with a deck gun, and you're going to have to move on. So a lot of stuff to consider. I'm not going to get into all of it about, do I have a water supply? Don't have a water supply? You're going to have to figure all that out, but that's an option. Hit it with a deck gun. Maybe you can't go interior. You don't have the other resources, and you can just do the best that you can do with what you got. And that's a good option for you. Or again, if maybe you have some more resources, but you just don't want to commit to interior operations because you don't have a RIT. It's, you may have a very small number of people there, or you don't want to stay exposed outside that long because of other unrest going on in the area. So use the ladder pipe, knock it down, move on. It is what it is. It's the best we can do. I mean, if there's a risk of someone being inside, if there's a report of that, that's a hard decision. It just depends on all the other circumstances, what you can do with the resources you have. That's everything we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And the worst case is just, you may have to let it burn. That happens sometimes, where they have these, like I said, civil unrest and those situations where there's only so much you can do, or you're maxed out and there's no resources to take care of something. So do what you can. And it's, unfortunate, but that's just the way things are. And this situation we're talking about, it may get to that.
Now, we've been talking a lot about, out there, so to speak, out in your response area during an event like this, but things might change right back at the firehouse too, right? You mentioned before a couple of things that I don't think people think about in terms of the safety of your firehouse and things like that in an event right there on your home turf? What do you got for that?
Yeah, there's a few different ways to look at this. You could have a situation where, the what we were talking about at the beginning, the homeland threat from terrorists, where the maybe law enforcement is overwhelmed and fire department kind of shuts down for a while until we can get things, the police can get things stabilized. And if that's the case, who knows what's going on? You should have some kind of watch. You should be paying attention to what's going on around the firehouse. So there should be always someone that's looking outside the firehouse, what's going on, or if this is some kind of prolonged event, or again, the civil unrest stuff, you need to be paying attention. And it may be a situation where you want two people doing it at a time to, you don't want to leave someone else out there by themselves, as far as just maybe in some kind of watch room or watch desk that you have, something like that. You have someone else there to support them. So figure out that beforehand. Think about that. Maybe just talk about that you're going to have some kind of 24-hour watch to make sure that the firehouse is safe and something doesn't happen real close to us. We're just paying attention. We're vigilant. So that's when we're talking about the firehouse. But one thing when we're there that we can't necessarily control is if something were to happen where there's some kind of mass casualty event, we may have people that just put their friends or the loved ones in their car and drive them to the firehouse looking for help. So we have no control over that. The fire department may be shut down, or we can't respond at this point, and then people just come to us. What are we going to do? I mean, I don't know. It depends. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to think about. You can start kind of a triage thing there, or do you take them and throw them in the back of the engine or the ladder truck or whatever, and you don't have a transport unit and you drive them to the hospital? Maybe that may be the only option you have. I mean, those are going to be hard decisions. So think about what you're going to do and think about, what that threshold is, man. Those are messy situations, man, but it's possible. Stuff like that's happened in the past for all different reasons, and probably going to happen again at some point. So
Again, there's a lot here. This is and I think people are hesitant. I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and write it off because it's such a low frequency event, and we're and you and I both, we don't love going deep down into the what if rabbit hole. But I think that was sort of the point of that opening passage, was to give you some context that there is a good possibility. And that doesn't mean that you live in fear of this threat. It means that you rise to the level of being a professional in the face of it. But I think you got a lot of good tips here of, I think, starting points. But I think the main takeaway that we want for this is to just have the conversation, whether that's, as an officer with your company, and it can be really casual. It can be like, hey, I was thinking about this, and I just want to talk. Who does what? Who does the watch? How do we divvy up the supplies? All this stuff. And then if it's up the chain of command, what are we doing with resources on a battalion level? Things like that. It's all about starting this conversation, and hopefully the conversation leads to, let's get the tourniquets out. Let's practice that. I think the point is we need to take this off the shelf of what if and bring it down into our normal routine drill. There's a lot of things that we practice that we don't use every day, right? Let's just put this right there in line with that and keep the conversation going. And like you said, it can be as simple as getting some bulletproof vests out, putting them on, practicing with tourniquets, having conversations about maybe doing a drill on the reverse lay to the hydrant. It's not everyday stuff, but it's worth being competent, or at least exposed to the potential risks and scenarios of all these different situations, right?
yeah, I mean, I would say half the stuff we talked about is a mindset of things we don't normally deal with. What should we do, especially in a leadership role and focused on the company officer? What do you do? And then the other half of this is these different skills where a lot of the skills though are things, just normal things. Using a deck gun is a normal thing. Some of the bandages and the clotting stuff and tourniquets, that's in the sense of that's a normal thing we may use on a single person shot. The, ladder pipe, that's a normal thing. Some of this stuff, these are just normal skills. You're just applying them in different, I guess, an abnormal situation for us. So if you're good at all the basics, I always like saying that it's going to be a lot easier with more complicated stuff. If you've thought about some of the what ifs, it's going to make it easier. You may not have a plan for everything, but it may make it easier to come up with a plan. So
Yeah, and I think another thing that talking about this stuff does, as gloomy as it is it forces us to think about our mindset as who we're going to be on the day. People like to thank us for our service and all of that stuff, but are you really going to be the hero on the day? Are you going to show up? And I think we had this conversation the other day, and we said, "What are you going to do? You're at work, and this big event happens. What are you going to do? If you're at home and you're maybe you live in the area of the firehouse, and this big event happens, what are you going to do? Are you going to go into the firehouse? You're going to help out? We had a wide range of responses, and some of them were not so admirable, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that, these kind of events are when we're expected to rise to, what we swore to do. And I don't say that to, give you a big rah-rah speech. I just mean to say that it's actually helpful to kind of think about it and be in the mindset of on the big day, because we hear, we read about these events and everything. And some of us have experienced some of them to, varying levels of intensity, and, yeah, everyone talks the talk. Yeah, this is what I'm sworn to do. This is what I do. Yeah, I run into burning buildings when everyone else is running out and all that stuff. But, on the day, the big day, are you going to show up? I hope so.
yeah. So I guess back to the beginning. I mean, we talked about some of this stuff in a general sense, but I really recommend looking into this possible threat here. Look at the description, or not, I'm sorry, not the description, but the show notes. And I'm going to have those links for you. I mean, if you really want to dig into this, which I encourage you to, is the Sean Ryan show. I have a link to that one where they talk about that. Sarah Adams, her Instagram account where she gives updates on this. And then also the book, the Gathering Storm. If you're in any kind of leadership position, you really need to at least have a general understanding of this possibility, because if it materializes the way the terrorists, the bad guys want it to materialize, their goals are unfortunately not, I guess, are significant as far as they're trying to go after 10,000 to 30,000 Americans. So is their goal. So this is, a serious thing. So look into it, just understand it at the very least. And I guess that's it. That's really, it is what it is. It's not a fun topic, but
no, it's not. Gloomy.
Yes. That is a word I say sometimes.
Yeah. Especially about this topic.
This topic. It's gloomy. So anyway.
But thanks for hanging in there with us. And thanks, Cap. I think this is valuable stuff. And I know that you've sort of felt the pull. We've talked about it a lot, and it's it's kind of been hanging over our head this episode. But you've really felt a strong pull to get this stuff out there. And again, if nothing else, just start the conversation about it, make it real for people, and realize we've got a job to do. So,
all right. I don't got anything else. So.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks for stopping by. Check us out at firegroundcompany.com. You'll find links to all our social media accounts and our YouTube channel, and you'll stay up to date on everything we're working on. We also have a store on our website where you can support us as we grow this community, plus working on some great courses to help you strengthen your leadership in the fire department and support its traditions and culture. last but not least, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, leave a comment, spread the word, get this out to the firefighters who are hungry to make the job even better.
The Fireground Company Podcast.